Hey there, I'm Bruce. Welcome back. Today I want to show you how I made these scooped serving boards. So this comes from an idea where I had a flaw in one of the boards that I had one time, and I was trying to think of how to salvage it, and I thought, oh, let me just scoop out a section or two so that you could put this as a spread and have olives or grape tomatoes or something and have all kinds of stuff on here, and it just kind of gives it a different element. So I made two of these recently for a client. Something I started doing is actually inlaying their initial with some opposing wood right here. Just gives it a nice touch. So let me show you how I made them. This project really came into being out of necessity, which is how a lot of my projects do. While making another board like this, I discovered a flaw in it, and I was trying to figure out a way to not have to scrap the entire project, but rather to salvage some of it, and this is what I came up with. Before I even started on the project, I wanted to put together a little bench to use outside. That way, all of the chips could just fall to the ground and I wouldn't have to pick up. So I've got some of this red oak that was milled up and has just been sitting in my dad's barn for almost 15 years. You can probably tell from how poorly the jigsaw performs that I'm not a big fan. In fact, I actually resorted to a handsaw instead, and it ended up being faster. I took a little time to sketch out by hand around some of the defects in the wood to come up with a shape and kind of an organic design that I liked. This is different for each board, but that's kind of what makes this type of thing unique. I took them over to the bandsaw after that and just roughly cut out the shape that I had drawn. Next, it was time to add some areas that I wanted to scoop out. On this particular board, it did not have the defects I was talking about earlier, but I'm just going for that same scooped out look. Here's that little bench I whipped together so that I could do this carving outside, and it worked pretty well. It really saved my back by getting the work surface up higher so I didn't have to hunch over much. How I've done this in the past is to use a flat disc sander, and well, that works okay. It just creates an enormous amount of dust, and it does not go very quickly at all. Arbortech sent me their TurboPlane and their ball gouge to see what I could come up with, and man, what a difference they make. The TurboPlane cuts quite fast, and it leaves a nice finish once you get the hang of how to use it. It takes a little bit of practice to get going with it. Plus, it's throwing off chips and not just dust, so it is just much better to operate. As you can see, I did all of the scooping on the face of the piece with the TurboPlane. I used the ball gouge on a different project that I'll show you in another video. I also used the TurboPlane on that one spot on the handle that was curved. I couldn't quite get in there very well with the bandsaw, so the TurboPlane was able to get in there and create that curve just fine. Big thanks to Arbortech for sending those out to me. On the first ones you saw me carving, I was just eyeballing the depth and stopping often to make sure I was not going too deep. Another way that you could do this, and one that I've done in the past, is to use a Forstner bit to drill to the depth you want before you start carving. Then, all you have to do is carve down until the drilled hole disappears, and you know that you're not going to go too deep as long as you don't go much past that. Once it disappears, you're done. I wanted a way to dress these up and to personalize them for the clients that were buying them. These boards are way too long to fit in my laser engraver because they're almost 3 feet long, so I settled on the idea of using a monogrammed wood token in a different species of wood. For these, I used some thin zebra wood I had, and it worked great. I just drilled a shallow hole using the Forstner bit so that it would have a flat bottom. Then I laser cut some wooden tokens and glued them into place. I made sure to leave them a little proud of the surface so I could sand them flush later. I drilled out the hole in the handle with a Forstner bit, but I didn't try to get too exact with it. These have a real organic feel, and I just kind of kept with that. Then I got a 1/8 inch roundover bit and put it in my trim router and gave all the edges a softer feel. One of the boards had a little bit of a twist in it, so I grabbed my hand plane and took it to the back side just to even it out a little bit. Next was to raise the grain so that whenever these get washed or wiped down after use, they won't feel rough again. I just spray a little water on the board and wipe off any excess. After it dries, I do a final sanding with 220 grit and trust that they'll keep feeling smooth even after some use. If you want to see my entire finishing process for my other types of cutting boards that I make, I'll put a link to it up in the cards and in the description. There were a couple of voids in the board that showed up once I started doing the final sanding, so I grabbed some of my Starbond tinted black CA glue and just filled in some of those voids. Shooting it with some activator makes it set really quickly, and then I can just sand it flush. If you want to check out some of the Starbond CA glue that I used here, I've got a link to it in the description below. The final step was adding finish. It's so gratifying to see this wood grain come to life. For this finish, I'm using Mahoney's walnut oil. I've used it in a few other videos that you've seen, like the wooden box that I made, as well as the serving tray, and I just love the way it brings out the very figured parts of the wood. It really brings out that grain and makes it pop. It's very easy to apply. You just squirt a little bit on there, wipe it. I usually let it sit overnight. By the next day, most of it has finished soaking in and has hardened, so I just wipe off any excess. I've also linked to this below if you want to check it out. This Mahoney's walnut oil is a food safe finish, and I've seen a lot of bowl turners use it, so I've been liking it. Also, it looks like it should go on a sopapilla or something, so that's delicious. Don't put this on your sopapilla. So I really like the way these turn out. This particular board is a massive 3-foot long serving board. They've been really popular, and thanks again to Arbortech for sending me the TurboPlane and the ball gouge. I used mostly the TurboPlane to do all of this dishing, and it worked out really well instead of using a flat dish sander with dust everywhere. So big thanks to Arbortech. Thanks again for supporting what I do, and thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Who knows why I chose to do this in August outside in Mississippi. It is very humid and very hot.